Currently, I think Facebook is probably the social media platform most contaminated with AI quote-unquote art. However, today I bring a new candidate to your attention, which is LinkedIn. And I want to talk today about how LinkedIn is being enslopified as we speak, which is hard to imagine because it wasn't particularly great to begin with. I mean, it's already known for being one of the worst social media platforms out there. The content is largely uninteresting and superficial and disingenuous and egoistic at worst. But now we can add garden right with AI slop to the list of things LinkedIn is known for. Now, it's fully on me for making the decision to join LinkedIn, and it's also my fault for browsing once in a while to see what's happening on the platform. However, it's only because of my sacrifice that I can bring you breaking news like this as of today. Let's head into some of the embarrassing examples. Now, these examples mostly come from two types of posts you can make. One is a mini presentation or book, which is basically just an infographic slideshow. It reminds me of when I was a kid and I used to make comic books by scribbling on lined paper and then stapling them together at the seam. The other type of post you can make is an article, which has a header image. So obviously, these are both great opportunities to put some AI slop down to reflect your grand leadership and or business advice. Let's start off with a pretty good one. Sorry to rage bait you, but we are starting from the top. So this is obviously AI generated, but she at least has the correct number of fingers. Unfortunately, the colors hurt my eyes. Like that yellow highlight at the top is so saturated. If an actual designer or artist did this, I believe they would have changed the hue of that or at least incorporated it into the rest of the image. If I were a graphic designer, which I'm not, I also would have drawn the woman exiting with her back to the viewer or in a different view that made it look like she is actually leaving and not entering. Like, yes, I know the exit sign is there, but I just think this would have made a more thematic impression rather than it looking like she is walking towards the camera or the viewer. And finally, why employees quit job? Like, that sounds so silly. How about why employees quit? That would have been a better title. Anyway, moving on to some images that are starting to get a little sus. First of all, we have some EQ habits with a slay girl boss on the cover. However, I don't know where her hand is. I'm sure it's supposed to be in her jeans pocket, but it's instead under the bottom of her jacket and doesn't make any sense. She's also standing on a glowing portal stone. And then on the right-hand side, we have a woman holding an umbrella. She appears to have a third arm, but not a third hand, and one of her hands is severely compromised in some manner. It does say at the bottom, repost to help others grow. And I wonder if that's a third arm that you could be growing if you repost this image. Again, a couple of obviously AI-generated graphics, a woman with too many fingers, and a woman with extremely deformed fingers. You can tell by these images, though, that the prompters are trying to go for a more traditional art style, which is kind of interesting. Again, the prompter is looking for a sort of watercolor style, but if you look at the red hand, I think I count 7 fingers, at least 6. Again, this hand has way too many fingers. I'm not sure why you would look at that and think it's okay to publish with your name attached to it. And then we have an interesting billboard type generated image, which kind of looks okay at first glance, but if you zoom in, the people in the background are just blobs of shapes and color. And of course, the actual billboard company, Slop, is my favorite billboard company to exist. Here's a header image that links to an article about future-proofing your organization. Now, the title uses a lot of big words, and the image attempts to use some big words, such as correction, definitions, deferent actions, soctions, and what I think is dovisiogzganbe. At the top, I just noticed there's also yoi, which, that's amazing for resilience, power, adaptability, and execution. So I can definitely see why they chose this image. Now, this is just your quintessential AI image. It's so bad. But what is funny is that this is a promoted image, so the company actually paid to make me look at this, which I find extremely funny. Now, this is a bit of a simpler AI image with text overlaid, which obviously I know is not part of the actual AI image, but I thought the spelling mistake was funny because there's literally one sentence. How hard could it be? But no, it has been enslopified. This image is just downright scary, and what's scarier is that one of the skulls has hair still. And then we have somebody making a post about retirement, but the woman's stump of an arm is fused to her handbag, which is very scary. Otherwise, this painting done by ChatGPT or whoever looks a lot like these music videos for 10th grade Spanish that we had to watch. I mean, they did help me learn Spanish, but they left me scarred for life. If you know what I'm talking about, leave it in the comments. Many people are publishing multiple of these little infographic booklets, and they're obviously using similar prompts to generate the images because of the similar style of the images generated. But there's still issues, like the hands are messed up. Okay, I thought that AI was better than this. I thought that AI had reached a point where it could draw the hands properly, but apparently not. Now, here's another example of somebody trying to be consistent with a certain style. When I grab a magnet, I tend to super glue my knuckles to the magnet as well. And, my index finger does go invisible sometimes. It's just one of the dangers of grabbing a magnet. And then in the image on the right, would you not take the 3 minutes it takes to just cut out the background and make it transparent? But of course, you wouldn't know how to do that because you're not an actual artist or graphic designer. Now, this one I actually had to laugh. I love that this is 11 tips to stop saying sorry. And it has this very androgynous, rainbow colored, definitely naked, watercolor-esque image on the front cover. Mike Leber, you're cooking up. You're actually cooking up something interesting, okay? And he popped up even more with 9 ways to take nothing personally and how to stop others control your emotions, because that's immediately what comes to my mind as well. The misshapen pupils and all. You know what? Even if the image doesn't have any anatomical mistakes, I feel like it still looks bad. It has that fugly AI sheen. Am I wrong? Does anyone look at this and think, yeah, that looks great? I don't know. And then I started to think, so what would we typically have done before this? And you know what? Corporate art actually has a style. It's called Corporate Memphis, and it's named after a group of Italian designers and was popularized by Facebook. Facebook actually hired creative company Buck to thoughtfully and intentionally create this style called Allegria style. And you can see here some shots from their style book that basically outlines what the elements of this art style are. So it's comforting to know that even if this art style kind of annoys you, it was at least intentionally created by humans. And here's an example of one of the images they had and some comments from the art director. You know what? Even LinkedIn has a Corporate Memphis-esque style. You can see here from some of the graphics you can choose when announcing some sort of milestone. They have similar features like exaggerated limb proportions, non-representational skin colors, etc. But of course, I can't expect everyone to commission a creative company to design them a totally new style of corporate art every time they want to make a post. But back in my day, we had these things called corporate stock photos. Just business people doing business stuff. And I'm sure you could pay a fee and use that photo, stick it right in your article. But not really seeing that these days. What also came to mind are these little 3D guys. You know what I mean. You've seen them in Google Images. So this leads me to my question. Is LinkedIn AI slopping morally reprehensible, or is it just kind of bad? So the first point that could support it is that maybe the slop's purpose is not to create art reflective of the human experience, but to draw attention and visually convey a theme, so it gets a pass. We all use tools that help us make our content faster. Like to make this PowerPoint, I used the template. But, even if AI is used on LinkedIn not as an insult to human life, but as an advertising tool, publishing such slop represents a lack of investment and dedication. Like, should I really believe what you have to say about business and leadership if you can't even count to 5, which is the normal number of fingers and thumbs on a human hand? The second point that I thought that could support this LinkedIn slop is that generating an image of a frustrated girl boss CEO in blue pants Disney style animation creates less carbon emissions than getting a human to create the same image. There's actually a study written in Scientific Reports by AI that explains running your laptop for as long as it would take to create a digital art versus generating it actually releases a lot more carbon. So are we really saving the environment one 6-fingered woman at a time? Honestly, I don't have a comeback for this one. But, I would argue that these carbon emissions could be avoided altogether by simply not creating an 8-page slide deck on power phrases for circling back with your boss. So this leads me to the conclusion. LinkedIn AI slop is just kind of bad. And at least we get a laugh out of it. I hope you got a laugh out of it, because I did. Well, thanks for watching my presentation today, and I'll catch you next time.